Hello, Buckeye fans. Welcome back to another Bucknuts Instant Reaction. I'm Patrick Murphy here with Dave Biddle of Bucknuts and 24/7 Sports. And we just finished up talking with Ryan Day for his weekly press conference ahead of the Illinois game. Dave, a lot of stuff from that press conference, but you started off with what I think was one of the more interesting things, and that is the reports, including our own reporting, that Ohio State is at least pursuing red shirts for defensive end CJ Hicks, safety Malik Hartford. I think there's probably some others under that consideration as well. Ryan Day wasn't fully ready to admit that that's what they're going to try and do, but he didn't say no either.
Yeah, I like what they're doing here because, like, what if all of a sudden Jalen McClain, for example, gets hurt and you don't have Malik Hartford? No. They're going to try and redshirt him because he's played in 4 games, right? I know CJ has as well. So you can play in up to 4 games and still redshirt. What I forgot until Ryan Day said it was
This is the craziest part of
that you can play in the entire postseason and still redshirt. If you're only playing 4 regular season games or less, then you don't play in the next 8. Then you can play throughout the postseason. And I think that includes the Big Ten championship game if they get there. It includes the college football playoff, any postseason game.
I know it includes the playoff. I'm not sure about the Big Ten because
that's technically a postseason game, though.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
But anyway, it's interesting because in CJ Hicks, same deal. Right now, they like their depth at defensive end. What have we seen, though? Kenyatta Jackson, another thing we're going to get to. They did say there's a chance he's going to play this week. My guess is he won't. Why tell Illinois that? And especially if it's, I know they said it was a stinger on the broadcast. That wasn't a stinger. That looked like a head injury to me. And that's 2 head injuries in like about a month for Kenyatta. So I think he'll probably sit out. But if all of a sudden, they still have good depth there at defensive end, even if Kenyatta has to miss a game or two because Zion Grady's stepping up. But what if all of a sudden they lose a bunch of depth at defensive end? You don't want to say CJ Hicks is definitely redshirting. So what Ryan Day said was, we're going to see if we can redshirt him, but it's going to be a week-to-week thing. Every week they need to be ready to play just in case. So I really like this a lot. And again, when now you'd like to have them like all hands on deck for a certain game at the very end of the regular season. But if you make the CFP, which I am going out on a limb and think this Buckeye team will, it's cool to know that then you're going to have CJ Hicks and Malik Hartford if you need them for depth, and it won't cost them a year of eligibility. CJ would have 1 year of eligibility left. He never redshirted. Malik would have 2 years of eligibility left. He also never redshirted. So, and we're hearing, now anything can change. At least I'm hearing the plan is if those guys do redshirt, they're not redshirting so they can go somewhere else. They're redshirting so they can stay here. And for CJ Hicks, for example, this is his first full year playing defensive end. Maybe he could break out next year. This is Caden Curry's last year. There could be more opportunity for playing time. So who knows? I mean, that could be the plan now, and they decide they want to leave. But it sounds like they're going to try to redshirt both of those guys, and both those guys plan on returning next year in 2026.
I think it's really interesting because often these kind of conversations are happening. Like, this isn't new, right? These conversations happen with guys, but it's usually young guys, right? You don't usually hear this with the older, both these guys have been around. They both played. Malik Hartford started a game as a true freshman a couple of years ago.
We've seen it a little bit more now. I imagine the postseason rules have changed that because we saw with Lorenzo Styles Jr. last year.
Yeah,
he played in 4 games in the regular season, and then they redshirted him, but he still played in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And then look, now Low Styles is back for a 5th year because he never redshirted at Notre Dame. Some of these guys are thinking he never redshirted. Like CJ, I had somebody tell me CJ Hicks redshirted. I was like, no, I'm 100% sure he didn't, but I can see why you think that.
He could have. He only played. I mean, he played
5 games or something. Reminds me of Kyle McCord's freshman year here, where he played that 5th game, and it's like, well, that's a year of eligibility there. But I like what. My gosh, Ryan Day just checks all the boxes, and like these guys could be disgruntled. It doesn't seem like they are. They get it. And we'll see. There's always things happening behind the scenes that we're not privy to, but it sounds like this is I really like this plan that he's putting together here.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense. Look, you've got 2 guys who are probably good enough to play and at least contribute for this team. But next year, you're going to need another defensive end. You're going to need a safety because we are all under the impression that Caleb Downs is going to the NFL, I believe. So having guys that have some experience coming back and can play these 4 games this year, and as you mentioned, the postseason, now ready to potentially step into a bigger role. And as you said, a lot of things can happen. Guys can get hurt. You may need them to step in, and this plan goes out the window. These guys may look at it at the end of the year and say, look, I've waited my time here. I'm going to go somewhere else. That happens.
It can happen, yeah.
And look, too, we saw it this year with a guy like Bo Atkinson entering the transfer portal. Ohio State may also find somebody may enter the transfer portal that's interested in the Buckeyes at one of those positions. And it's like, well, you got to do what's best for the team ultimately. You want to do right by the players. And I think this is helping to do that. Even if they decide not to stay at Ohio State or Ohio State decides to go in another direction, then at least it's not that Kyle McCord situation where he knew he had to leave because he needed to be a starter somewhere, because they did burn his redshirt year that freshman season. So now at least these guys have options and the Buckeyes have options. And I think it makes a lot of sense, as you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. And to me, I mean, there's no downside to it this season for Ohio State, because at any point they can activate them, to use an NFL term. They could at any point, because they're going to be dressed, they're going to travel, they're going to be ready to go. That way, if there's injuries, not just during the week, but injuries in the game itself, it's not like the NFL where you only have like 45 people that are active that day. You can put anybody in there, who's eligible to play. CJ Hicks and Malik Hartford will be eligible to play in every game. They'll be dressed. And I don't see a downside for it, and I see a long-term upside. So I think this is a very good plan.
I will be interested to see the travel roster this week. Do they go? Because
I think so.
You're right. You don't have a limited number. You do on the road, though.
You do, but they've increased it. I mean,
Yes.
When I first was on the beat, it was like not quite NFL-like. It wasn't like you could only travel like 53 and dress for, but it was like
I think it's
trying to
74.
and
it's a weird number.
I want to say it used to be 65, and it was a tight squeeze sometimes for these guys. So they're trying to make sure you have a backup long snapper with. Yeah, you
Right.
got to have a backup at every position. Usually you want a pair and a spare. So it's definitely increased over the years. You don't hear the coaches grouse about it as much, but it's still a numbers crunch. You can't have 105 guys making the trip. So, from my understanding, CJ Hicks and Malik Hartford will travel to Illinois, but I'm not sure about that. I guess that should have been my question.
Well,
I'm new to the beat, man.
I do think it makes sense to have them there. It'd be one thing if you were banged up at one of those positions and you knew there was a good chance that you were going to need somebody. And it's like, well, if that guy gets hurt, then we need a backup and we don't want to use, say it's at safety. You have McLean go down, knock on wood, for instance, or Downs. You got Fahim Delaney that can go, and we need a backup there. Do we want to have it be Malik Hartford, or do we want to have somebody else? We're not
Roy Roker.
Yeah.
That's true. They could even take one of them, and let's say Kenyatta doesn't go. They can then take CJ with the thought of not playing him, but just in case we need him, if another DN or two goes down, we have CJ. But maybe with safety, if somebody goes down, we can play Leroy Roker, we can play Fahim, like Pat said. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what they do. You're right. It makes the travel roster a little more interesting. Apparently, the availability report is just like,
well, it tells us some things. Questionable. Bryson Rogers did not suit up on Saturday.
that's the thing. I even put that in the analysis part. I was like, typically when a guy's listed as questionable, he's not going to play. But Ohio State,
at least in these games.
In these games, that's true. Yeah.
You mentioned Kenyatta Jackson. We'll see on that one what it's going to be. I agree with you. I would not be surprised, though. He was very active on the sidelines. Like, I know you were watching the game on TV. I was watching it back, and they showed him a few times, right? He was on the bike, he's moving around. So he seemed to be all right. But if it is another head injury, which seeing it again, definitely, at least the way his head kind of whipped.
And then he hit his head on the first contact was his head on the guy's thigh.
Yeah.
And then Kenyatta hit his head on the ground. Again, this is a couple weeks after he had what looked like, I shouldn't even say what looked like. He was knocked out cold. As we all know, if you're knocked out cold, it's an automatic concussion. It's not like, well, you're only knocked out cold for a couple seconds. Now, to what degree of I don't know the exact medical terminology, but I do know I've had doctors say if you are knocked out, you automatically have a concussion. So we know he's had one. If he's had two now, I'm worried about that. What I would do if that's the case is be very, very, very cautious with him. Very cautious with him because you have good depth at defensive end. You don't want him to get a third because that could be out for the year type thing, or at least out for many, many weeks. So, I don't know what to make of it. We've seen as football fans and as football journalists, we've seen time and time again, whether it's high school, NFL, college, whatever it might be, a guy gets knocked out, and Kenyatta didn't get knocked out this past game.
No.
You get the head injury, and you're kind of woozy, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I feel fine.
Right.
But your brain might not feel fine.
Yeah. So we'll see on that one. I think this would be an unfortunate week not to have him because I do think they need to get after Luke Altmaier a little bit going to Illinois. Ryan Day was very positive about Illinois. Said in his mind, this is a top 10 team. He was asked about that Indiana blowout loss. He said, you throw that out. He's like, that's not the team we're going to see on Saturday. He used the example of Nebraska last year. I think that was coming off of Ohio State's bye. when Nebraska had just been blown out. I think it was Indiana also.
Yes.
The week before.
And that game was at Ohio State.
Right.
Nebraska came to Ohio State and gave them all they could handle. You're right. My time, and I'm sure your time on the beat too, more often than not, Ohio State comes out kind of sluggish after the bye week.
Yeah.
You even called Brett Bielema one of the best coaches in the game.
Country,
I literally had to be like, I literally went like this, and I'm like, be professional.
Yeah.
He's definitely not one of the best coaches in the game. He's pretty good, though. He's good for Illinois, though.
Yeah.
He's good for Illinois,
Look,
for sure.
He's got that Illinois program as a top 25 program.
Exactly.
I think they're, 17?
17th, and they were ranked at the end of last season, too, 9-4. So, yeah, he's doing a good job.
Yeah, so, Ryan Day first of all, I think he does believe this. I do think he understands that this will be more of a challenge this week than some other games this year. But I also think he is doing a very intentional job in press conferences this year of sending messages to his team, which he's also doing, I imagine, behind closed doors of can't look ahead. Like last week, he talked about it. You've got to have the same focus, the same approach, the same everything each week, regardless of the opponent. It's about Ohio State and the way that they prepare. And thus far, it has worked every game.
Yeah, and I think it helps Ohio State a little bit mentally as far as their players being mentally focused on this game, that Illinois was able to bounce back from that 53-point loss to Illinois or Indiana and beat a good USC team. Not a great USC team. They're not going to challenge for the Big Ten championship, but they're better than I think anybody expected. They've got a really good quarterback. That's a game that could have went either way. And if you're Ohio State and USC wins that game, no matter what the coaches are telling you, the players are probably thinking, this team got beat by 53 by Indiana. Then USC comes into their house and beats them. Then they wouldn't be ranked either.
Right.
And even if they beat Purdue this past week, which they did, and you'd be going in there like, this 2-loss Illinois team's no good. I think now Ryan Day can sell that and his players will believe it. You have the number 17 team in the country. He can pop on the tape. Illinois has given Ohio State a lot of tough times over there in that wind tunnel in Champaign.
Even here.
And they're ranked 7. And even, we don't need to talk about 2008 at all. Or 1994, never mind. Okay, or 2001. Okay, I'm gonna shut up now. But yeah, Illinois has given Ohio State some fits over the years. I mean, even going back to '84, the Keith Byers, the shoe game where he lost the shoe on the long run, Ohio State had to come back from a pretty big deficit in that game to win that game. So I think this helps get Ohio State focused, their players. 17th team in the country. Big noon kickoff's going to be there. And
big 11 a.m. kickoff.
There you go. Hopefully our guy Dave Portnoy will be there. No, I'm not kidding.
Yeah, that's a topic for a different day.
Kidding.
The other two things that I think were most talked about during this press conference, start with Julian Sayin. The way that they brought him along is extraordinary traits, as Ryan Day likes to talk about. He mentioned after the game that you like to be very intentional about the way you can bring quarterbacks along. But he was asked, and I think this is a good point, they haven't always had the luxury of doing that. Like Justin came in, yes, he had a year at Georgia, but he had to go out there, he had to play right away, and he had to do well because you didn't have the elite defense. You had a good defense then, I guess. But they were
an elite defense in 2019. DJ was completely different, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Kyle as well. You had
Yes.
to go out. You had to make plays. Maybe Justin's not the best example. Though I would say I don't think Justin had quite the same weapons. I mean, he had good weapons, but it wasn't like, hey, just dump it off and my guy can go 60 yards, which is not what Julian's doing. But I do think that this has been about as seamless. Plus, he sat behind a national championship winning quarterback last year, which none of those guys got to do. So I think this has been about as an ideal of a setup to have your young quarterback. He knows talented, but probably not ready to go right away. Come in, develop a little bit, and then work his way in and obviously become the starter this year.
Yeah, it really did set up perfectly. Like everything you mentioned, got to, learn the system, got to, be on a national championship team, but not have to really, be a key cog. Got to play, got to preserve the red shirt. What did he play in 2 games last year? Something like that.
I have to look at that.
I don't think he played in 4, but he definitely got out there a couple times. I think he threw a total of 12 passes, maybe. So maybe it was 3 games.
Handful of drops.
Yeah, just like the first game this year. So yeah, it really was. If you look at it, like 5-star, number 1 quarterback in the country, according to the composite, I think in-house 24/7 had him number 3 in the country. It's like splitting hairs. Everybody had him as a 5-star, handpicked by Nick Saban. Then he comes here, able to learn. And it's not like he got here in June of last year. He was able to learn from January of last year all the way through the national championship. And then I'm sure they knew. I mean, we said this all offseason. They knew who their starting quarterback was going to be. There was no reason to have some grand proclamation. And I'm just so impressed with his poise and his accuracy and just everything about him. And yeah, I got the feeling if they needed to unleash him those first 4 games, they could have. And they did I'm talking about really against Texas and Washington. They just felt like Why?
Yep.
First year starting quarterback, our defense is suffocating them. And then we thought maybe they would take they would unleash him, take the training wheels off, so to speak, against Minnesota. And that's exactly what they did. I couldn't be more impressed with where he's at after 5 games.
Yeah, and they're going to need him this week, especially because, Ryan Day was asked about the running game. He said he thinks it's been solid. I would push back on that a little bit. I think
when Bo's in there, it's solid.
Well, and I mean, even on Saturday, going against a real Big Ten defense, a good rush defense statistically, his numbers weren't, it was his worst game so far. I think 60 some yards. It was, I think, 4.4 yards per carry, which isn't bad, but I know there's more to this running game, and I thought it was credit to James Peoples coming in. He got to play early, but really late with the second team group.
Yeah, he looked
ran
good.
Hard, right?
Yeah.
And some of it, I think, is the players still figuring out things, but I think the coaching staff and the plays that they call, I think they using CJ Donaldson strictly to run up the middle. If he's going to be only a short yardage guy going forward, and we'll see if that was just the game plan for Minnesota or if it is for the rest of the year. But I think he's shown some things being able to bounce outside. But the point is, Julian Sayin needs to be ready in what can be a difficult environment, not fan wise, but weather and wind and things like that.
Yep.
He'll have to battle some of that. The good news is, and this was another topic, this defense. And Ryan Day was asked about, the first drive, they come out, they play it sort of off coverage zone, and Minnesota's able to march right down the field. They get in the red zone, and Ohio State says no more, forces a field goal. The rest of the game, not every play, but a lot of it, they were in press man, they were in man coverage. You just flip mid-game what you're going to do because, whether it was, hey, let's see what Minnesota's going to come out in, and then we'll figure out how to play our defense, or, hey, this is not what we expected, let's switch it up. I don't know. The ability, the versatility of this defense with Matt Patricia making the play calls, the coaching staff able to get these guys ready, and then the players able to execute is just so impressive.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was them trying to lure them to sleep a little bit. Oh, this is what they're going to play all game, and then bam,
Yeah.
and then you lay the hammer down. Yeah, that's impressive, and Patricia does a great job of mixing things up, and not even series to series. I mean, sometimes it's like play to play, and he's the opposing quarterback just almost always looks confused. Not on the first drive because again, Ohio State was being very vanilla, as you said, Patrick. And then they just went balls to the wall, and Minnesota couldn't do anything. This defense is so darn impressive. Now, have they played a really good offense yet? No. I would submit Washington. We can't just look, Washington couldn't do anything either. Washington's actually a good offense. Like I thought they went out to Maryland, and I thought Maryland might win that game. Going all the way across the country, they almost did. I mean, I knew it was going to be a close game, and I think Washington's going to end up as a ranked team. So Texas's offense obviously wasn't what we expected. So have they faced a great offense yet? No. They'll be tested this week. Altmaier's one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten. You could argue one of the better ones in the country. I don't think he's as good as Julian Sayin, but he's veteran. This is his 3rd year as a starting quarterback at Illinois after transferring from Ole Miss, I believe.
Yes.
So yeah, they've got a good quarterback, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we will. If you want to watch Ryan Day's press conference, Steve Hellwagon should have that posted on our YouTube page. He will have that in the transcript up soon. We will have plenty more throughout this week. Dave, thank you.
Thank you,
You
Patrick.
guys, thank you. And tune into Bucknuts 24/7 Sports. See you guys later.